There's no need to separate them. So of course the Rebbe said, so they said, I'll bring you a raya from a Gemara. This whole time, Rebbe. You raya from a Gemara that the little boys and little girls can play together. And it was this Gemara that they brought the raya from. You remember the story now. They lost the keys of the besmedrus. It fell somewhere in B'shus Rabbim. They didn't know exactly where they were. So A, they had a problem finding it, and B, even if they found it, how could they bring it? You're not allowed to be mavish something to B'shus Rabbim. You're not allowed to bring something from B'shus Rabbim into B'shus Yochid. So what are we going to do? So it was B'shus Rabbim b'Shabbat. So what they did was they didn't have an agent, so they went to ask for Padas. So they asked for Padas, what should we do? He told them, you know what you should do? Zil Dover Tali, go take a little boy and a little girl, have them play together over there. I must make a correction. It doesn't say together. It says let them play there. And while they're playing there, chances are they'll find something that's in the grass, that's on the ground. The mashkechaluhu maisaluhu. If they find it, they're going to bring it for you. So the Gemara is going to bring a raya from here that you're allowed to let them be over Yisurim. But this fellow told some Rebbe, you see, if that said, bring a little boy and a little girl, they'll play together. So you see, there's no problem. Zok the Satan Rebbe, from there it's Adra, you have a raya pumfakeret. Vosab is the Gemara speaks out, Taldi Vitalia. Bring children. Vosab is a boy and a girl. Zok the Satan Rebbe, I'll tell you why it has to be that for a boy and a girl. Because if the boy comes with the little girl, he'll know he's not allowed to look at the little girl. Because it's so ingrained in them from a youth. So he'll be staring at the floor the whole time. That's how he'll find the keys. Because he'll be looking down. That's what the Satan Rebbe said, shot. The Chayashi likes to chat? The Geshmak of shot. Anyway, but the Achronim do talk about, first of all, why do you need two children? And why did it have to be Dafka Zachar and Keva? What's the Takab shot? So the Chassam Sofer drills a little bit down here. And he says, that the reason why it has to be two children, let me ask you a question. How many people does it take to pick up a set of keys and bring it somewhere? One, right? So we know the halacha is, if a malacha that could be done, that's normally done with one person, is done through two people, it's referred to as shnayim, sasu, they're potter, because it's not doing the malacha in the derech that it's normally done. So even though you're letting children do this, or you're even bringing them in hopes that they'll do this issue for you, you still want to minimize it. So why a boy and a girl? So Chassam Sofer says the reason why it has to be a boy, because a boy would be able to find it better because they're more focused, and a girl has to be there because there's a special reason why a girl should be there, because she would make.
But he has to tell the boy what to do.
Oh, maybe because she tells what to do. Very, very good. Very good. There's a special reason. Some never goes into it in detail why two children, why one a boy, one a girl, because each one had their certain miles. Okay, gewaltig. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so Zok Gemara, I'll call upon him. Alma, you definitely see from here, because Sovar, you see at least with Pedas holds, cotton oichel nevelos. If there's a cotton eating nevelos, ain't Bezin mitzuvin la frisha. Bezin doesn't have to stop him from eating them. And it's interesting because we're talking about cotton who's being moichim mishus l'shus, or cotton who's being mavish something mishus harabim, or a cotton who's eating truma when he's not supposed to. Vasabis, the Gemara, when it wants to describe this scenario, talks about oichel nevelos. I'm sorry?
It's right. I'm not talking about Shemashas.
Why?
It wouldn't be a problem. I'm trying to bring a raya over here.
It's also a problem. I don't know what you said. Yeah, but so you don't want to minimize it. You still need to minimize the issue. Oh, that's a good point. Hold on to that thought. You know, if he's eating, he's so starved to death. That's a smart the Gemara is going to introduce it later. But I'll call upon him, the Chiddush of Oichel Nevelos is that it's ingest non-kosher food, which is metamtem as a there you might have thought that even though the halacha it's also, but you shouldn't let them eat non-kosher food. I'm sorry, it's a rice as well.
How do you see from here that you can cut with letting you want to because they were able to do Shnaim Shalasu, so now they can eat, they can do a Alma Cassava.
If you bring the rye from this case to that case it's more chomer. I hear what you're saying. So you're asking me, hey, I'm trying to say the reason why there happens to be a shaila about it, and there's a shaila about it, and it's a raya. This man Domer holds like that. So so you're saying, well, you don't have a raya from here up to that degree. I hear that's a good heart. Unless the Gemara knew in advance that there are two shittas about this, and it's a question of A or B. Regardless, you're saying maybe it's a third shitta. Maybe only for their bones, not for their rices.
How do we see that? I don't know. Without some sort, you would think that they allow them.
They're both their rices. I hear. Okay. Let's bring a raya to this halacha. The Raja says, "Lo yomer adam latina." A person should not tell a child, "Haveli mafteach." And Rashi says, "Derech reshus harabim b'Shabbos." Don't tell your child, or any child, not just your child, to be over a deraisa. Don't instruct the child to be over a deraisa, or haveli chaysem, which is also a deraisa. Again, it's talking about Shabbos. Ella, what you should do is, if the child is doing it anyway, not based on your instruction, maniche toilesh, you can allow them to cut down something that's growing, which is an Isser Darais on Shabbos. Maniche zoyrek, you allow them to throw something, Dalar Amis, which is an Isser Daraisa. So you have a raya from here. You have a raya from here that cut Neichel Nevelis ain't bezin mitzvah lafrisha. Whether you need them or not, you're not allowed. You're not allowed to instruct them to do it, but if they're doing it on their own, you could let them continue. That's a good child. There's a good child. If what are the responsibilities of chinuch? I don't know. Maybe if it's a cut negilach. What if there's a cut shaloi gilach? Right. So Amar Abaye, and really Abaye has Moti's teretz. Amar Abaye, you don't have a eye from there. The toilish that you allow the child to do is not necessarily a toilish that's an issue of Maybe it's ba'at she'ein nokov. Maybe it's an ba'at she'ein nokov, which is not considered mechubel karka. And if it's not considered mechubel karka, when the child is cutting from it, it's not a malacha deraisa. Or a zoyrik, maybe it's an akamos derbanan. Maybe it doesn't mean that deraisa they can place like a rishos rabbim deraisa. So your kasha mati, really, the Gemara asks, you see there's a chilik between a deraisa and a derbanan. So just because you see that someone allows a child to be over nisur derbanan, you don't have a right from there that you would let the child be over in nisur deraisa.
Abaye taught us to be patient.
Except Abaye taught us.
Be patient, not be impatient.
No, Moti is asking a good kasha. Because Moti is asking a kasha from the Gemara. How could the Gemara say Alma Kasav Kat Nechol Nevelis? If you hold this only the Rabbanon, then you don't even say the Gemara. Our Gemara, even Abaye holds. Yeah, your assumption that Padas holds Kat Nechol Nevelis is true. Now the question is, do we have a riot to that from a Mishnah? Hashba, Ovid Kechavim Shabol Lichvos. A guy, he sees you're falling asleep, and you're trying to fall asleep, but you're twisting and turning because the light's on in your room. And the guy sees, so he comes and he wants to blow out the candle so that you'll fall asleep. Don't instruct him either yes to put out the candle or not to put out the candle, because you don't have a responsibility to make sure that a guy is Shem Shabbos. Let him do whatever he wants. Don't instruct him to do anything. But if there's a child who's coming and he intends to put out a fire, then you'll instruct the child and you'll tell him, Al tichve. Why? Because you are responsible for a child's yisurim. You have to make sure that they don't do it. So the problem is, this seems to indicate quite clearly that a person is mechuyev to prevent a child, a katan, from doing an aveira. When this child, this brisa, you're talking about a child coming to put it out, he's not done putting it out on his own. He's doing it for his father, even if his father didn't instruct him to. And if you look at his third line in Rashi, "Sha'atinik tzoyfe ba'aviv," while he's about to put out the flame, he's looking at his father. And here's his father saying, "Oh, finally I'll be able to fall asleep." Now, it's obvious to the child that this is something that the father wants him to do. And the father's looking at him in anticipation of him shutting a light off. That's as if the father is actually instructing the child to do that. But in the case of the keys, they didn't even tell the children that the keys were lost there. And therefore, the children couldn't even get a sense of the fact that this is something that the father wanted.
I have an interesting aura because it's a lot of people, most people don't find a single light or one or two candles disturbing for night. So why is it that somebody would want his light out when he's trying to fall asleep? He only want his light trying to be extinguished when he wants to do a mitzvah at night. So maybe here we only have a riot during the mitzvah.
Look at the art school, we're talking about fire.
What?
Oh,
Oh, that's going to do damage. Oh, okay. So I was wrong. So I didn't have a good example. Thank you very much. Should have corrected me right away. I mean, you didn't have a knaf kamina. Now kind of sagaser. Gewaltig.
You're just as good as the art school.
Okay, gewaltig. So to Gemara factor. The kavase, we have to stick to parallel cases. So when the Brisa compared the case of the cut, where you're supposed to stop from the case of the goy, where you don't have to stop him at all, you don't have to say anything, you have to say the goy is the same case. The kavase gabem tois al das Yisrael. That means the goy also knows that you want him to put it out. So Ibazoi, why is it mutter over there? So me sorry, would it be mutter? So tomorrow that's not a problem. Because even if the goy knows that you want him to put it out, he's not doing it for you. He's doing it because of the bonus he's expecting to get from you, but the Shabbos. Zogt Rashi, even without the Yid knowing, why? The guy knows that he's going to get paid for this. So the guy is never doing it al das Yid. Even when he's doing it al das Yid, it's for himself. The cotton is doing it because he knows his father wants him to do it. Tashma, Ben Chaver, the son of a Talmud Chacham. This is very offensive. This Gemara, this Brisa. Ben Chaver, the son of a Talmud Chacham, shiragol leilech etzel avi imoy amoritz. He goes to his father. His father is a big brisker, and he married a girl whose father bossed himself to support him, and therefore he had an einikel Talmud Chacham, and he went to his shmer the Zaydid Amoritz, right? So the halacha is you ain't choishishin shema yachilenu dvarim she'enim mesuchanim. The Edim doesn't have to be afraid to let his child visit his shver, who's paying all his bills, because his shver, I want my shver to feed him. I want to save the money, but I want to make sure that my shver is only feeding him chol of Yisrael. That's right, chol of Yisrael. I want to make sure it's properly mesukan. It's not Trumas HaMaishers. The Trumas HaMaishers were separated properly. So he's allowed to do it. Now, what if the child comes home and said, look, Zaidi gave me a candy, and he came home with a fruit, matzah b'yodeh pears. What if you see your child came home with pears from Zaidi? You don't have to take them away. You don't have to take them away. So once again, here you see that you don't have to be mafresh. And on that, Rabbi Yochanan commented, on Rabbi Yochanan, b'demai hikilu. So what was the problem? Rabbi Yochanan had to emphasize that it was speaking by Demai, and since it's Demai, there's a special kula. Because anyway, we know that Roiv people, even Rebbe Maratzim, are also misakin their tefillah. So there's a special allowance here, which would indicate that Rabbi Yochanan, by the default, would hold that you would have to stop your children from doing the Avera. It's only because of Demai Kilu. So at the time of the Demai, Havadai, if there was a Vada Yisr, Boy Lasure, Rabbi Yochanan would have forced the child who was taking the fruit away from the child and be misakin them. The problem is, didn't we just learn Rabbi Yochanan earlier? Didn't Rabbi Yochanan say that the only reason why it was usher before by putting out the flame is because the child was doing it al das oven, which is mashma. If you're not instructing him to do it, or it's not a perceived instruction, he's just doing it on his own, you're allowed to let him be over there. Here, Rabbi Yochanan says, no, even if he's doing it on his own, like eating the pears on his own, you wouldn't let him do it, and you'd have to stop him from doing it. Over here, there's a special kula because of the bite. So what does Rabbi Yochanan know? Do you have to prevent your child from being over there or not? Rabbi Yochanan has a suffix, he's not sure. And therefore, if you try to bring a raya that you have to stop your child, he'll say mehechatesi. If you try to bring a raya, you don't have to stop your child, he'll also say mehechatesi. In other words, he holds that we don't have a raya. It's not definitive as to whether or not someone must prevent his child from being over there. Tashma. Let's have another case. Ben Chaver Kohen, the son of a Chaver who's a Kohen. He would go visit regularly his mother's father. So you have a Kohen who married a Kohenes, a Kohen who married a girl whose father was a Kohen. Now the Einikel wants to go visit with his grandfather, the Kohen, who happens to be Amaretz. Zog to Gemara, Zog to Brisa, Ein Choshen Shema Yachilenu Truma Tameya. He doesn't have to be concerned that his father-in-law will serve his child Truma Tameya. He could send his child to play by his ID. Nowadays, we don't have to worry about. Don't have to worry. We sent them there so they can watch television. But in those days, they had bigger problems. They had Truma Tameya, so you don't have to worry about it. And then when the child comes home and he has pears from Zaidi's house, Mata Biyadi pears, Ein Zakagloi. Once again, you don't have to take it away. So this seems to be a raya that you don't have to prevent your child from being over nisher. So more of a Truma D'Rabbanan. Maybe that's also speaking about Truma D'Rabbanan, so you don't have a right. That by Isur D'Oraisa, you don't have to intervene. Tashma, let's try another right. Yoinek tinik v'haylech, a child is allowed to nurse, me'ovedes kachavim, from a goite, umibehema tmeya. I'm not sure how that would work, but ve'ein choshishin, we're not worried. V'yoinek shekets, we're not worried that he's nursing from isurim. Rashi says, ve'ein choshishin. We're not worried that he is actually nursing milk from an Isser. Like from a behemoth Tameya or from a Vedas Kachavim. You're not worried about that. You don't say that it's Usser, you allow the child to nurse. But, and Rashi adds in, biyadayim. You let him, but you don't actually feed him, nevelois, utrefois, skotzim, urimosim. Such as chalav behemoth tmeya is aser begadol midaraisa. Rashi tells us if you drink the milk of a behemoth tmeya, that's aser midaraisa. We learn it out from the fact that it has gone 3 times. Okay, so al it says that you shouldn't feed him biyadayim, Isser. You let him nurse Isser, but you don't feed the child biyadayim Isser. Umikulan yonik mehem, and from all of them they're allowed to be yonik. Vafilu b'Shabbos, even on Shabbos, where there's another Isser of Mefarik. Uvegadol Osir, but for an adult, it will be Osir. Abishol says, Noihagim Ayinu, we used to firzach, Sheyonkin mi behemet tahira b'yom. We used to firzach to be yonik from a behemet tahira yom. So that's the Brisa as it is. So Ketani Miyas, let's go back to analyze the words of the Brisa. It says right at the beginning, Ein chashishin b'yonik. Check. We're not concerned that a child is nursing from a dover meshukit, a dover os. You have a raya from here that you don't have to prevent a child from doing it there. So tomorrow, mishum sakana. You know why? You know why we allowed a child to be yoning from a sheket, something that's disgusting, like a behemoth tameya or an isha tameya? It's because the child will die if the child doesn't have what to eat, which is Ke'enu what Dubi mentioned earlier. There is such a factor. Sakana shemlo yinik yamas b'tzava. The child will die of thirst. In fact, Gemara, if that's the case, ihachi gadol nami. Never mind the tinnik. If someone's about to die of thirst, sure he's allowed to drink something that's also. Gemara gadol boy imdana. In order for a gadol to be able to be over an isha deraisa, because he thinks he's going to die of thirst, it needs an assessment. Rashi does an assessment. Im yochal lahamtin ad motzei Shabbos v'yasabet. Maybe you'd have to wait until motzei Shabbos to drink if he could survive that long. A child, you don't ask any questions. In fact, why? Katanami liboy umdina. Amar Huda Beit Abishua stam tinuk mesukan etzel chalov. you can assume by default that a tinnik is no makom sakana. Therefore, we let the child drink. Therefore, we let the child drink, but an adult, under those same circumstances, would require an assessment.
Why is Shabbos a factor here?
Beautiful. So let's see Rashi. I wasn't sure if I should learn this Rashi before or after. So Rashi is chaylev biyadav chayiv mishum afar. If you milk an animal, that's an isur deraisa. It's called mefarek dover migidula. You're separating something from its source of growth. The milk was created in the udders, and by you milking it, you're separating the milk from the udders. By yoinik, if someone is just nursing, then have a mefarek al yidei shinu b'ayne kalachiyat. It says chayiv, so chayiv means deraisa.
Going back to the fire, you're gonna say kind of like just let the fire go.
It's only, if it's a sakana that someone's life will be endangered, you're probably allowed to put it out. But what if it's only a sakana that your house may burn down? Then you just have to walk away. You have to walk away and let your house burn down.
And God for insurance.
Well, many fires that Jews have that are insurance covered often break out mysteriously on Shabbos.
No, seriously, 200 years ago, could you imagine a Yid that would have that mistallion of watching his house burn down?
Yeah, it's a huge thing. And it's happened before. The Pnei Yeshua, he used to be a regular balabos. What happened is one of his neighbors had gunpowder, and it went off, and it literally blew up the entire block. And his whole family was killed, and he was trapped under the rubble, and he was being crushed to death. And he told Rebbe, I'm making a Kabbalah, that if you find me a way out of this mess, I'll write Svarim to illuminate Shas. And suddenly he found a way out in between the beams, and he got out and he was saved. So he mamish had a fire that killed him. I'm sorry?
The way you say the story is very strange. Like all of a sudden now he's going to write, and the Hashem would have said, maybe wouldn't have wrote Svarim? Like you probably delaying things or whatever.
I hear.
So I'll start right away.
Okay. I have a friend whose father was in the Holocaust, and he was an English Belarus, and he was not trying to go into chinuch. He was trying to open up a business, and he told Rebbe Shloim, if I'm saved from the Holocaust, if I come out alive, I will dedicate my life to teaching, to being a mechanech. And it was funny. He was an English Belarus who was a Rebbe his whole life, clean-shaven guy. He taught him deal, and he was a Rebbe his whole life. So, who said he was going to write Torah? Maybe he was going to be a regular working guy, go to Seder. He dedicated his life to learning. So maybe that's part of the story. But my favorite story with the fire on Shabbos, and Mati might know who I'm talking about. There's a young man who I'm friendly with, who used to work for a guy who used to make pop-up stores before the holidays and sell closeout stuff. And one Shabbos morning in shul, his boss walks over to him and says, "Oh, Ivai, did you hear last night? My whole warehouse in Mississauga burned down." So he asks him, so my friend says, "Oh, Baruch Hashem, you had insurance." He said, "No, I didn't have insurance. Everything got burnt." So my friend's thinking to himself, this guy is such a dry cup, such a crook. There's no way he got burnt. There's no way he got burnt. And then he thinks to himself, how does this guy know on Shabbos morning that his warehouse burned down last night? How is that possible? So he found out it was very, very simple. This guy was selling right before Kratzmach in his pop-up store, selling for cash, no receipts, no tax, nothing. He's just keeping everything, not cheshbon for anything. And then everything burned down. So there's no proof. He declared that he sold like $20 worth of schayda, and everything else got burnt. And I didn't have accurate inventory. I bought everything with a pound, all closeouts. So at the end of the day, he knew from that fire how to rachiv. Anyway, Dr. Gemara weiter. Hey Chidam, what is the case with you? Ika. Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped the Dibra Maskell. Abba Shalom Hagina Yinu Sheyonkin Behemet Torah B'Yom. We allowed Unika of a Behemet Torah on Yom. Amaptu Abba Shalom Hagina Yinu Sheyonkin Behemet Torah B'Yom. Hey Chidam, what's the case? Ika Sakana. If there's a sakana involved, Afilu b'Shabbos Nami. Why only on Yom Tov? Even on Shabbos. The idoleka sakana, and if it's not a sakana, Afilu b'Yom Tov Asher, it should be Asher on Yom Tov as well. So it's not a sakana, but there's tsar for the child who can't drink. Because Sovar, and he holds, the brides hold, Mefarik Kalachayatu, nursing from an animal is considered Mefarik Kalachayat. Shabbos, the Isra Skila, Shabbos where there's an Isra Skila to be Mefarik, Gozu Rabbanon, comma, even though it's Kalachayat. Yom Tov, the Isra Lav, like Gozu Rabbanon. And Rashi explains, Shabbos, the Isra Skila, Yesh be Mefarik Biyodov. There's an Isra Skila for someone who is Mefarik Biyodov. Therefore, Gozu Rabbanon Biyonik. The Rabbanon said, even though Yonik is Kalachiyat, it's not a this Deraisa, they said it's going to be Usher anyway. Bi'avagav de Mishanahu, even though he's doing the malacha not in the right way, and therefore the ain't a malacha min ha-Torah. It's not a malacha. Aval Yom Tov, the Chi'avid biyadayim leka el Isra Lav Yom Tov, where you even if you're doing it biyadayim, it's only in a shalav. Therefore, like Gozu Rabbanon Biyonik, they didn't prevent you from doing this because it wouldn't lead to an Isra Skila anyway. Okay, let's see the Gemara back. Tashma. Loi soichlom kishekatem. You shouldn't eat these things. Kishekatem. Rashi is saying, it's talking about shrotim, and it says loi soichlom many times, gabi shrotim. So this is an extra expression of loi soichlom. So we dashin loi sa'achilom. Do not feed them to children. So we're having this whole discussion if you're allowed to feed your child Isser. We have a Mefurish Shalav that says you're not allowed to feed your child Isser. L'hazer agdol v'alaktanim. My love, the amalahu lo'isaychlu. Doesn't it seem to mean that if you see a child eating, you have to tell them, don't eat? Zaktamar, no, you don't have a right from there that you have to stop your child from eating. Maybe it's merely loy, the loy list for loy b'yadayim. Maybe from the lab we just learned that you shouldn't actually feed this Isser to a child. But the lav davka, you see from this lab that if you see the child eating on his own, that you have to prevent the child from eating. Tashma, let's try the same tashma with dam, which is called nevesh mikem loy soichel dam. Once again, it's an extra loy soichel. It says many times loy soichel regarding dam, and we learn from here lahazir aktanim. So the Gemara asks the same question. My lab, the army lahu loy soichel. You have to tell them don't eat dam if you see them eating dam. The Gemara loy. The list for the pasuk is telling you that you shouldn't actively feed this to them. Tashma, Emor v'amarta. Rashi tells us that this Emor v'amarta is talking about v'amarta la'yem l'nefesh lo yitama ba'amav. This is talking about the prohibition for a coin to become tamei. And we learn from Emor v'amarta lahazak delam alaktanim. The adults have to stop even ktanim kohanim from becoming tamei. My love, the amalullah hitnu. You have to tell them stop. You shouldn't make them tamei b'yadayim. So we have three psukim where the Torah tells us don't either actively give the child Isser, or the other way you would learn is prevent the child from doing Isser. Why does the Torah have to tell us this three times? Utrichi, Yashmin Shkotzim. If the Torah only told us by Shkotzim you have to prevent a child from eating, that's because Shkotzim is a very serious Isser. Mishum di Surin b'mashu. A sheket is also to eat, even a mashu. And Rashi says mashu means b'cha'adosha. It's like the shear of an adosha is already enough to create an Isra Achila. Avol dam, but blood, the adi ikravias. There's more dam that has to be consumed in order to be over the Isra. So it's not severe Isra. Maybe then you don't have to prevent a child. Yashmin in dam, we should need a chorus. Dam bears an Isra chorus for someone who eats dam. Avol shratim, which is only a lav, emaloi. Yashmin hanatarti, and if the Torah only told us by dam, and by sheretz that you're not allowed to give this to a child, it's mishum the yisur and shava b'koil. Everybody in Klal Yisrael is prohibited from eating shratzim or dam. Abel toma, which is the isur only for a kohen, a maloi, maybe then since it's not so severe, you don't have to prevent the child. Yashmin toma, and if we only had toma, I would have said kaihanim shiny. Maybe when it comes to isurim that apply to kaihanim, which are the elite, mishum the riba and mitzvahs yisayros. They have many mitzvahs, but only there do they have to prevent the children. That's why the Torah in all these three places told us not to either feed Isser to a child, according to one approach, or to prevent the child from being over the Isser if the child's doing it on his own. Tashma, Shnei Echad Bikech V'Echad Cheresh. One is a Bikech, one's a Cheresh, so this goes back to our Sugya. Nesu and Shtei Choyos, and they're married to two sisters, Bikchois, both healthy. So one of these marriages is a Deraisa, and one of these marriages is a Derabbanan. Meishcheres Bal Pekachas, if the woman who's only married with her bono now falls to Yibam to her sister's husband, This is a regular erba, chamish asher rayis. So of course there's no zika. Well, what happens if it's meis pikech bal pekachas? Ma yasa cherish bal pekachas. The cherish bal pekachas is only married to this woman midrabanan, but her sister is now zokuk to him midaraisa. What should he do? So the halach is moitzi as ishtoy beget. He has to divorce his wife. He has to divorce his wife. The ashes achiv asur l'olam, and his brother's wife will be asur because he cannot do yibum because there's an issue derabbanan preventing him from doing yibum, and he can't do chalitza because he's a cherish. Yeah, that's why he can't do yibum because he's only married to this woman midrabanan because he's a cherish. Yet the woman who's falling to yibum to him is a deraisa. So it'll say that it's a choisuk ukosai. So Dr. Gemara, Amai moitis ishta beget. Why does he have to divorce his wife? He's a cherish. He's part of mitzvahs. If you hold that you don't have to prevent somebody who's part of mitzvahs from doing the avera, so why make him divorce his wife? Let him stay married to his wife. Amai moitis ishta beget. Teisiv gabei. Teisiv gabei. Katan oichol nevelasu. He's a katan oichol nevelasu. You don't have to prevent him from doing this, sir. So come on, you're right, but you forgot who he's married to. Mishum misuri didah. She's a pekachas. So she's not allowed to be married to him. He's allowed to be married to her. Ich will, sie nicht. Right? So, yep.
Why is it on her?
Whenever there's an Isser Bia, the Isser always applies to both of them. Zok the Gemara weiter. Zok the Gemara weiter. Could be even Tosha speaks it up, but very clearly doesn't. Zok the Gemara weiter. Tashma. Shnei Achim Pikchen. You have two brothers who are Pikchen. Nesun Shtei Achayos. Achas Pekachas Vachas Chareshes. So this is exactly the same case. One's a marriage that's deraisa, one's a marriage that's derabanan. It's another example of the same case where if the guy who's married to derabanan has a sister-in-law fall to deraisa, it messes up his marriage. No, believe it or not, there's more. Yes, I think we're quoting that Gemara. Yeah, we're quoting this. So what happens? Shnei Achim Pikchen Nesun Shtei Achayos Achas Pekachas Vachas Chareshes. So marriage A is the Raisa, marriage B is the Rabbanan. Meis B'Kerech Bal Chareshes. If the B'Kerech Bal Chareshes died, so it's only a Zika de Rabbanan, which will definitely not interfere with a marriage that's the Raisa. So Mayasa B'Kerech Bal Pekachas Teitze Mishum Achosisha. Of course, the Zika is not even there because it's a Chosisha. But what if it's Meis B'Kerech Bal Pekachas, where you have now a Zika de Raisa to a man who's married Midrabanan to the sister? Mayasa B'Kerech Bal Chareshes. So once again, the Mishnah says, "Moitzes ishtoi." Beget, he has to divorce his wife because of the deraisa the gazika. But his sister-in-law, being that he's a pekach and she's a pekachas, veishes achav bechalitza. At least he can give chalitza. In the other case, where the man was a cherish, she became an option chutza, right? So, fact the Gemara once again, by my moitzes ishtoi beget. Why do we force him to divorce his wife? Teisiv gabei. Let him remain by him because katan oichol nevelasu. It's a katan oichol nevelas because she's a katan. She's not mechuv mitzvahs. The Gemara, we should be sure today. Sure, it's very mutter to let her stay married to the sister, but he's a pekach. He's mechuv mitzvahs. He's not allowed to remain married to her. Amarava Tashma Shnei Achim. There are two brothers. Echad cherish v'echad pekach. Nesun l'shtei achoyos. Achas pekachas v'achas chareshes. This was the last set of cases in our Mishnah. Meis cherish bal chareshes. If the cherish bal chareshes dies, ma yaseh pekach bal pekachas. Once again, it's a marriage that's deraisa being confronted by a zika that's derabanan. Teitze mishum achayishtoi. The zika is bottled. It's a nerva. But what about the opposite case? Meis pekach bal pekachas. So now you have a zika deraisa that's interfering with a marriage that's only derabanan. Ma yaseh cherish bal chareshes. Moitis is to begin. This is achav asur loyla. Correct. The Gemara v'hacha the lavi surah daika. He's a cherish, so you don't have to stop him from doing cherish. The lavi surah daika, and she's also chereshes. So why do you force a divorce? The Katani and the Mishnah still says moisi is this to get. Amar Shmaya gzeir mishamatari shivam l'shuk. If we let them stay together, people are going to think that the Yavam is mutar l'shuk. And Rashi explains mishum gzeir shatari shivam l'shuk. The Amrinon Teis of Cheresh is Gabi Cheresh. If you allow them to stay married, Lo Yadi Inchi, the timer, Mishum Katan Oichel Nevelasu, people aren't going to think that this is a marriage of Isser, but we're just not breaking it up because you're not Mukhlif too. But what will they think? V'savri the kedushin the da dochula lazika de bekachas achaisa. They'll be convinced that even the rabbanon the marriage will break the raisa de kazika. The ain boil achos kukasai. And he's not being boil achos kukasai because in fact his marriage is going to be mevatel lazika. Hilchach, if people see that, so what's going to happen is okay, he's living with his wife. If he's living with his wife, obviously it breaks the zika. So that means the sister shouldn't need yibum, right? In a case where she's with the rice also, there's no zika, she doesn't need yibum, she can walk free. In this case, she definitely doesn't need yibum because her zika is the raisa and their marriage is only with their banan. But people are going to let her get married l'shuk. People are going to think that's what's going on over here, and that's why we break up their marriage so that this woman shouldn't get married by mistake. Okay, so Baruch Hashem, we finished Nacha Perik, the 14th Perik. Hadin b'nei hadin l'cheresh, hadin l'cheresh, hadin l'cheresh. So Haisha shahaka hi ubayla medina sayom. So we're discussing the conditions that have to be in place in order to trust a woman that her husband died. Haisha shahaka hi ubayla medina sayom. And when they left on the trip, shalom beinai leveina. They were getting along. They weren't fighting. So there's no reason to assume that she wants to get rid of her husband. And there's shalom ba'ila. There's peace in the world. There's no reason to assume that someone got killed in war. It's a stable time, and she has no incentive. She has no incentive to suggest that her husband died. And she came back from the vacation, and she said Meis Bailey. So the halacha is Tinase. She's allowed to remarry if she's not Zokah Yibum. Meis Bailey, but I don't have children and there's a brother-in-law. Tis Yabam. We'll even let her do Yibum based on her testimony. What if it's Shalom Beinoi Leveina? What if they're getting along fine, but it's a time of war. And if it's a time of war, she's more likely to believe that if her husband went missing, that he got killed in the war, even though maybe he didn't. But it's a time where there's mass murders going on. Or Katata Beinoi Leveina, or they're in a big fight, so she would love to shake him, even though she would become Osir Labalu Laboil, she's still happy to do that anyway to get away from this guy. And there's Shalom Ba'ilam, Uvasav Amr Meis Bailey, there it's Ein in a menace. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, La'olam Ein in a menace, Elam Kain, Vasa Boicha, Uvigadeh Kruin. If she comes dressed in the nines with a smirk on her face, and she says, oh, my husband died, you don't trust her. If she's coming totally broken and obvious, then will you trust her. Amrulai, the Chachamim argued in Rabbi Yehuda. They said, Achazu, Va'achazu Tinasei, regardless, she's allowed to get married with her testimony, even if she is not obviously in stress. Tanu we learn. Shalom beinai lebeina. Why does it say Shalom beinai lebeina? Mishum de kabay lemisni ketata beinai lebeina. So Rashi explains. Why would the Mishnah speak out Shalom beinai lebeina? Let's see Rashi inside. The Shalom beinai. She'ein shas cherem. It's not a time of war. The tema that you would say v'didami me'aymed liba, where she really didn't see him die, but she's assuming that he died. In Pirishim and the Chodesh Chachayim, let's say he disappeared for a couple of months, even though she didn't see him die, she'll in her mind to convince herself, Vaday Hoyav Chazar, it must be that her guhu listed. My husband must have been murdered. The Hoyel, the Lav Shas Cherim, the Balk. This is not a shas cherem. Eloi chazisa de meis. If she didn't see with her own eyes that her husband actually died, chaysha lekukula. In the back of her mind, she's afraid that she'll get messed up. Shema yavoi la'achar shanisas. If her first husband shows up after she remarried based on her false testimony, she's going to be in big trouble. And therefore, she'll never say testimony that her husband died because she thinks that he died. Only if she could be 100% sure that he died. If they're arguing, you might be able to say, he writes a lesser atmalab. She forget. It's a prize. She wants to answer herself on it. So the case of Shalom Beinai, which is the first case, is juxtaposed because we're comparing the two. One of them, which she's believed, one of them she's not. Tana Shalom Ba'ilam, Amar Rabba, my time of the Muhammad. What is the reason why if there's a Muhammad we don't believe him? She'll say the even though she didn't see him die, like Rashi explained, she thinks he died. She'll rely on that to say that he died. Sol Kedaita, she thinks as follows: everyone's getting killed. There's gangs of murderers running through town, and people are being murdered en masse. Who bullet? That my husband's going to get out? Chances are he's going to suffer the same fate as everybody else. So in terms of Loimar, if you're going to say even the Shalom Beinoila Beinoa Natra Ad Chazi, if you're going to say, what do you mean? Why would she assume that he died if she didn't see him? Because everyone else is getting killed. She loves him, so she's not going to write him off until she's 100% sure that he died. Zakimar, there's still a chashash. Zimnin the machal begira. She actually witnessed her husband getting stabbed with a spear. How is that? How is he going to survive? Begira is an arrow. He got shot with an arrow. Oiberoimcha with a spear. The sovereign, she saw him. She saw him mortally wounded. The sovereign father mace. But a medic might have come and saved his life. So that's what we're concerned about. Rabbi wanted to say that Rabbi, if it's only hunger, it's not like a war. And in a time of hunger, you would still believe her that her husband died. There, she's not going to say he probably starved to death. Then Rabbi changed his mind. Then he said, as a matter of fact, if there's a hunger, she'll also write him off and say that he died. What made him change his mind? Because he had a very good interrogation session that showed him how women think. Tahida Asas, like Hameda Rava. A woman once came to Rava, she told him, Baili Meis Barov. My husband died in a hunger. So he played along with her to see what she was really thinking. Amrullah told her, Shaper Avdos, the Shizvis Nafshek. It's good that you left him while he was starving to death, but before he actually died. Because had you stayed on, you would have also died. So Kedaita, do you think the Bahu ported in the fifta, the Shavkislay, do you think for a second that the little flower that you were able to gather together, that you left him, have a chai? No way, there's no way he could have survived. So he was playing along with her. So she was, oh, great. I was validated. She was very happy. Amrullah, she said, my nami, I see the roof can. I see the rabbi is pretty smart. You also caught on. You also agree with me that there's no way he could have survived. So there, Rabbi chapped right away that Chitaka didn't see him die. So he realized that he couldn't be mad to her. Hadar Amar Rabba, then Rabba changed around and says, Rabban Graham Muhammad. He went to the other extreme. Not only don't I trust her, if she comes and says that her husband died in hunger, that he died, it's even worse than Muhammad. Why? You know Muhammad, if she just comes along and says my husband died in the war, we don't believe her. What if she says, no, my husband was not involved in the war at all. My husband got sick and I was there with him, he died in his bed. There you would believe him. If you look at by Ravine, if she says he died with hunger, you won't even believe her if she says that. Ad Amra makes the kavartiv. Only if she says he died and I buried him. She has to be very, very specific. Otherwise, you'll still think that she's making it up. And Rashi says, why? The ilumeis bil Muhammad. What is the chances by a Muhammad that he survived? Sarva shall think Shema Baruch. Maybe he happened to escape. Benita got saved. Alva Barov, he's for Echyichya. If it's hunger, how could he get out of this one? So therefore, she's so confident that he died, she's more likely to lie. So she has to be much more specific in her testimony that he actually died for us to believe him. Mapoilis, what if he got covered by a wall? Rashi should not fall the house collapsed on him. Or a tornado came. Or Yamapal Kolbatair. And all of the houses in the city were getting knocked down. So she assumed him as well. It's also like a Muhammad because the Amr b'Didami. Because once again, she'll write him off even though she didn't actually see him die. She's not believed. Shiluach Nachashim v'Akravim. What if there's a plague of snakes and scorpions? Harayin Kol Muhammad as well. The Amra b'Didami. Dever. What about if there's just a Magefa? Amri law Harayu Kol Muhammad. Some say it's like a Muhammad. Amri law ain't like a Muhammad. And there are those who say it's not like Muhammad. Amri law Kol Muhammad. Why Damar b'Didami? Amri law ain't Kol Muhammad. The Samchi they'll rely on the Amri Inchi Shev Shnin have a musna, the inish bin like shmi, but also many people die, but if it's not your time, it's not your time, and therefore she won't lie. Okay, let's stop over here. It's a Bishmak how Rava sort of trapped her. Rava played along with her and got an admission out of her.